Good evening, everyone. My name is Santos Cruz, and I am the Chief Legal Officer for CentraCare Health. I'm joined by a number of CentraCare leaders, both from the IS&T and technology, as well as communications and legal tonight. The first announcement I have is that we have lots of pizza left over. So if you are still hungry, please, we won't be offended if you get up and get some more pizza and enjoy it as we do tonight's community meeting. Before we get started, I'm going to go through the agenda for the evening so that you have a little bit of an understanding of the different speakers that we'll have and the different topics they'll cover. After I'm done speaking, just in a moment, Sonja Peterson, attorney for the deaf and hard of hearing community, will be coming forward, that we've worked with for many years from MDLC. And then Rick Macpherson, who was actually the first attorney I started working with almost 7 years ago now on these issues, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then Della Breitbach will be coming forward as a member of the deaf and hard of hearing community to share with you her perspective in the resolution. Then I'm going to come up again, I'll be back up here to talk a little bit about the issues we had with our vendor, the Marty VRI system, and some of the work that was done. Rick will come back up and review some of the issues that we had and resolutions that we now have in the memorandum of understanding between CentraCare and the community, and how we can serve you better and how we can be held accountable going forward if there are continued mistakes or other issues that arise. We'll talk about that. Tonight is not a victory lap. It's really a commitment to continue to address the issues that have been identified, but also find ways to work together on new issues or reoccurring issues that we weren't able to be aware of up until this point. Then we'll have Scott, who has come out of retirement to join us to go over some of the work that was actually a problem on our system. And some of the tests that we did were very technological. And you'll hear a little bit about from Rick and Sonja that we hired a third party to go through and actually test where is the problem in the VRI system in terms of what problems were from the vendor, which problems were from CentraCare, and how those got addressed. And he'll actually be drawing from a report that was created by the third party vendor, not a CentraCare employee, that was chosen by your attorneys and paid for by CentraCare to get to the root of the problem. Then we'll talk a little bit, I'll come back up and talk a little bit about how we want this to be a model for how healthcare and the deaf and hard of hearing community work together going forward at a lot of other institutions. So we want to be a good example for, as you may not get all of your healthcare at CentraCare. You may get your healthcare in the Metro or in Alexandria, or all over the place. And we are one healthcare company among many that serves your needs. And so we're hoping that we can be a good example and provide a pathway for folks to continue to serve your community better and better and better over time. And then lastly, we'll let Sonja come up and describe some of the work about how we will work on ineffective communications going forward and how that'll be addressed. And then lastly, we'll take questions from you all. And then after your questions are addressed, we'll invite the press in. That'll be in about an hour from now. And we'll probably give some of the same information over again. You'll probably hear that. And then we'll answer any of their questions. After we're done with all of that, at about 7:15, 7:20, right around there, then we will allow you all to meet with your attorneys in a room privately for anything that you may want to talk about for ongoing work or perspectives from tonight's meeting. So with that, I'm just going to get started into my remarks. And where I wanted to start is actually something that is a little counterintuitive, or a little not what people normally think of with lawyers. And there's an old myth, I don't think it's true, but there's an old myth that there was originally 3 noble professions. I grew up in a dairy farm. I thought that was a noble profession. But originally, the idea was that there were 3 noble professions, or 3 degrees. There was the medical doctor, there was the juris doctor, and there was the doctorate of divinity. And all three were supposed to heal something. And the master of divinity, or the doctorate of divinity, was supposed to be healing the soul. And the medical doctor was supposed to heal the body. And everybody always kind of scratches their head on what was the juris doctorate, or the lawyer, supposed to heal. And the answer is, we're supposed to heal the relationships in the community. That's what we're supposed to do. It's not often what people associate with attorneys. But if you go back to even some of the older times, even in our state, you'll find that the way that it used to work, for example, like President Lincoln in the 1860s, before he became president, he was an attorney. He would actually travel with the opposing counsel, the people that he was supposed to go against, along with the judge. They would stay in the same hotels, and they would travel around and actually address the grievances of the community to heal that community as they moved around. And they call it holding court. And the reason why today, in the legal federal system, we say we're in the 8th Circuit Court. That term circuit literally meant the attorneys would ride around on their horses. This is why circuits rarely cross rivers, why we're in a different circuit than Wisconsin. They would ride around together and arrive to communities and say, what is this community hurting from? Where are the relationships breaking down? How can we as attorneys represent both sides to come together to heal this community from what's been ailing it for quite some time? And I don't know that we're going to find that from now on, lawyers are going to become healers of communities, but I do believe that your attorneys and the attorneys at CentraCare have made a very serious contribution to making that effort and common goal of really listening to the community about where are the pains. You know, you think about from a perspective of when I work with my children, or as you remember working with your own children or when you were children, the first question you ask is, where does it hurt? And the inability to communicate what is going on, where is the problem, is a fundamental promise that healthcare makes to each of its patients. And we want to do better at being able to understand, where does it hurt? Now, sometimes that hurt is a physical thing. It is a symptom. You need to have the technology. But in a broader sense, what tonight is about is, where was the hurt in the community this time? Where were the community of the deaf and hard of hearing not feeling seen, not feeling heard, not feeling recognized in their needs being met from the healthcare system? And so my predecessor actually was the first individual to make the promise to do this in a collaborative, voluntary way, to not go through the courts and go through the fights about how we're going to heal that pain, but actually to address it in a collaborative way. And as I took over that role, I really continued on that promise with Rick and then with Sonja to really identify, where are those problems, how can we address them together, and how can we do better together. So with that, I'm going to turn over now to Sonja to talk a little bit more about how that work developed and to share with you some of that progress. So Sonja, please come up.
So thank you very much. We're very happy that you came tonight. And I'm Sonja Peterson, again, with the Minnesota Disability Law Center. We are what they call a protection and advocacy agency, the part of the federal recognized network of lawyers and advocates for people with disabilities to help address legal problems related to your disability. So like a lot of the work that we do is involving the Americans with Disabilities Act. And one thing that the Americans with Disabilities Act really advocates for is what they call the informal interactive process to determine what is the accommodation that somebody needs. How do we make sure that a person with a disability gets the same service, the same quality as folks who don't have that disability? And that was one thing that was offered to us that was very unique in this relationship with CentraCare, is very seriously working on that informal interactive process to figure out what's the accommodation, what needs to be corrected. So I've been with the Disability Law Center for about 4 years now. So before I got there, and Rick was there for 25, something like that, good long time, and had already done a good amount of work with the deaf community and had established great relationships. But back in, I think it was about 2017, we got a series of contacts from folks in the deaf community in St. Cloud talking to us about problems they were having going in like to the emergency room at CentraCare with the VRI, meaning that they would be waiting for a live interpreter and they would be shown a video or screen with somebody online to provide ASL services. However, often that person wouldn't show up. They'd be sitting there waiting and didn't come. Or if they did show up, it would be blurry. And for a non-deaf person, blurry looks different. You have so much fine detail in your communication that hearing people don't catch. And so it's important to have a live person observe that to say, this isn't working. There's something wrong with this VRI reception. The bandwidth is too low. The frames per minute aren't working. So it'd be blurry or breaking up or not showing up or, being late or getting cut off. And we could tell that these were community problems. It wasn't just one person having this problem. This is something that needed to be addressed altogether globally. So Rick did contact the CentraCare and set up meetings to start to address this. I'd like to ask Della Breitbach to come up and give a little chat here about her interaction with this. I think it was really valuable having somebody with real life experience to interact with us, to give us a real good understanding of how this is going. So Della, if you want to come up and give a little explanation about your involvement with this process and what led to this meeting today. Thank you.
You can hear the interpreter? Okay. Okay, well, hello, everybody. This movement right here is how I and other deaf people call attention to the room, that I have something to say. We use our hands to say how we're feeling. So the reason I'm here, I volunteered to participate in this from the very beginning, initially, for the deaf and hard of hearing community. And all its diversity in the community. It's important to give a voice and a story about the importance of your experiences, your frustration, and the common connections in this frustration, and how we have felt dismissed, oppressed. So I used a survey, and I started asking the Disability Law Center about it. So they asked me how to do it. I said I was willing to work with Rick and I was willing to work with CentraCare in doing an evaluation. And the reason for this evaluation, as we discovered, is that it seems like they didn't have a strong enough infrastructure system set up to be able to see the picture effectively on these little screens. And sometimes they were disconnected. They would disconnect spontaneously. Sometimes there was an interpreter, sometimes there wasn't an interpreter. And we've all begged to have in-person interpreting. But often we're told that the common message was, and we've known this for many years, is that there wasn't an interpreter available at that time. So CentraCare was willing to partner with us to have this evaluation, and we identified many places where some areas were effective, some were not, and that the quality was not a good quality. So that was the VRI experience, video remote interpreting experience, and we said it was not good for our basic needs and in the moment, and that we really still wanted an in-person interpreter to be on their way, but sometimes it couldn't happen. And so again, after that, They started working on improving the infrastructure, the technology. We came back and visited. We noticed that there was an improvement, not a perfect fix, and there was times it wasn't good. That was our first time we came back. And then it got much better. But still, I have to say, Marty, we found, as a service vendor, didn't have enough speed on their end, did not have enough contract interpreters available. And so that's the reason we're here. And I just want to be able to say that partnering as on an ongoing basis with Rick and Sonja, you've been wonderful, but that partnership needs to be ongoing. This is about our access and our rights to access. And they need to know about us. And they know the community now. So I believe being here and partnering with all these important players and advocating for them, and we advocate for them all the time, will make the services better. So I want to thank CentraCare, Santo, and Rick Macpherson from Minnesota Disability Law Center.
Thanks, Stella. I know that made you nervous when I asked you to make the presentation, but you did a great job. Thank you. And it was very important.
Thank you.
It was very important for me to make sure Stella spoke tonight, because that was the essence of what we were trying to do in this collaboration. That this was not a collaboration just between hearing people to try and figure out how to fix a problem for you. I knew from my experience as a hearing person, I don't know what works or what doesn't. If I look at a video screen with VRI, first time I saw it on a high-def big monitor, I thought, oh, this is great. Then I talked to my clients who I saw were all squinting and were having a really hard time. They helped me understand that the image was blurry. Didn't look blurry to me, or at least not in a way that mattered, but it did to them. That's something that I learned. And as I started this process with the clients and with CentraCare, one of the important things that I knew we had to do was help CentraCare understand that a system that may look good to them was not effective. And it was only folks who were deaf who were going to be able to get that across. So talking about the process we went through, what we did with CentraCare, and when I say we, there was a team of us that involved folks from the deaf community who played a really important role in doing this process. I want to talk about what we did and some of the changes that happened. Later, Scott, the guy over here in the red shirt, will talk to you more about the technical stuff that he knows a lot more than I did. And I'll talk about what an important role he played, but he'll be able to give you more technical details. So here's the history of what happened. As Sonja said, we were initially contacted by a couple of folks who were deaf from the community here. A guy by the name of Shane Grom, who some of you may remember. He has since died, unfortunately. He played a really big role in getting this ball rolling. And another guy by the name of Omar Ibrahim, who's still with us and has stayed part of the team the whole time. He was a very good, very important member of the team. So they came to us first at the Disability Law Center. And I knew legal cases involving VRI can be very difficult because how many judges do you know who are deaf? Anybody know any? Me neither. I have never been in front of a judge, at least who admitted he or she was deaf. That said, so I knew from around the country, VRI cases are very hard because you have to convince a judge who's hearing that it's not good enough. They look at it and they say, oh, that's good enough. What's your problem? So we decided to try to approach CentraCare and propose to them that we collaborate. And what we proposed was that we would identify an expert, somebody who had a lot of experience with VRI, with the technical aspects of it, and that we would evaluate CentraCare's system. We would go and test each of the places, and with the help of the expert, try and identify what are the problems, what needed to be done to fix those problems. CentraCare agreed to do that. And so we started on this process. Unfortunately, as you may have heard, this started 7 years ago. And remember, in the middle of that was COVID and the pandemic, which shut down a lot of things. But after that delay, we did identify an expert to do the evaluation. We found a man who's deaf by the name of Richard Ray, who was the ADA coordinator for the city of Los Angeles for many years and was very familiar with VRI and the whole technical piece. And then we recruited some additional people from the deaf community, including Della. Where's Rhonda? And Rhonda, to be part of that team. You could stand up if you want, since
Hello.
Della already did. Okay.
Somebody.
So we would.
And also, Eden, what about? Oh, she doesn't want to? Okay. Over on the right side? Eden Grom?
That's right.
I missed. Right. I'm sorry, I missed what she said.
She came in at the end after Shane died and helped us at the end. Thank you. We were joined in doing this evaluation by CentraCare's technical staff, including Scott, who's going to speak in a few minutes. And what we did was we did 2 investigation trips. We visited several different locations at St. Cloud Hospital and in some of the and in another CentraCare facility, places where our clients had reported there were problems with VRI. And what we did is we took, not this cart, you'll hear in a few minutes that CentraCare has made some improvements to the cart that was used, but we took what we had available at that point around to all these different locations. And all of us, and then made calls to the Marty VRI interpreter on the other end so that we could see what the image was like, and also for those of us who were hearing, who were kind of representing the the medical staff who'd be in the room, could we hear them? So we did it at all these locations and evaluated the frame speed at these different locations. Now, during the COVID pandemic, I said that made some delays for getting this going, but it also there was a good side to it, because the hospital had to change to do more telemedicine, which meant they substantially improved the Wi-Fi system. If you walk through the halls of the hospital, you'll see these Wi-Fi hubs all over the place. There's a whole lot of them. I don't see them in this room. There might be, but in the hospital, they're very visible. So the improvements that CentraCare made, included increasing the bandwidth of the internet speed, the frame speed of the for the image. Scott will talk more about that in a few minutes. We also spent time, particularly the folks who were deaf, explained what the problems were with the cart that they were using with this little device, which wasn't very flexible. You couldn't move it around and see the pad very well. It's all very nice if you were standing right in front of it and the doctor was standing right in front of it. But if you were laying on your back in an emergency room bed or a table, you're looking up. You can't see. I'm not telling anything you don't already know, but the device wasn't flexible enough. Santo will also describe some of the problems we identified. So I think to sort of summarize what happened was, with the help of the expert and with the help of the folks who were deaf, who were part of the evaluation team, we were able to identify what were the problems. We were able to identify what CentraCare had done to improve the system, and we were able to verify that on the CentraCare side there were improvements from, let's say, before COVID to now. It is a different system now. I know that there's a lot of suspicion in the deaf community about VRI, and I'm not here to say it's a perfect system, but we do think it's important that people know that the system is better now, significantly better than it was now, and that it won't take the place of an in-person interpreter. But if you come into the hospital, if you come into the emergency room and you need help right away, your choices are you can wait for an hour and a half for a live interpreter, or if the VRI system is good, you can at least get going to start getting your medical problems fixed. So I'm going to turn this over to the CentraCare folks. I'll be back in a few minutes. I'll tell you what we did, what improvements we made after all of this evaluation process. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Scott Gangle. So at CentraCare Information Systems Department. And for the next few minutes, I'd like to maybe try to talk about the history and progression of VRI from a technology perspective. And for those of you that may not know, most of you do, but VRI is the video remote interpretation. So for many years, CentraCare has partnered with Marty for our VRI interpretive services. And back in 2013, from a technical standpoint, we had what they call a private or an MPLS connection directly between CentraCare and Marty. So all of our VRI traffic would traverse that one connection. And back then, to be honest, that connection had quite a few technical challenges. So in 2020, we moved all of that connectivity to and from Marty over our hospital internet connections, or our main internet connections. Now, what that did is it provided two things. It provided increased speeds, and it also provided for resiliency. So when one of those connections were to go down or have issues, the traffic could go over the other connection, which would prevent any interruptions in that service. So that was a good improvement there, but at the time we had 1 gigabit per second internet connections. Now some of you may understand what that means or not, and if not, ask me later. Or you can ask now and I'll try to explain. But that's pretty fast, and that's bidirectional speed, so it's pretty fast, but we know we had to do more for that. So in June of 2020, we upgraded both of our internet connections to 5 gigabits per second, which again gave us much more speed, efficiency on them. But as Rick had mentioned, due to COVID, we had other requirements that were coming, staff working from home, telemedicine, stuff like that. And so that started, we've seen that was going to suffice for a while, but then again, we proactively upgraded both those connections to 10 gigabits per second, which will provide us for quite a bit of growth for the future. And even since then, and I didn't have it in my notes, but we've separated all of our internet traffic from Wilmer, which is one of our other hospitals. We've separated all that off of using these connections, and they use their own connections. So in summary, we've done a lot to increase those speeds, have the resiliency that we need, and that's important for what we're trying to accomplish. And as Rick had mentioned, and Santo, in 2023, we partnered with our ASL consultant. And I have to say, from being a person of a technical background, Richard Ray was kind of, him and I just clicked, because he was technical at heart, but yet he understood, all of the issues that the deaf and hard of hearing community, is faced with. And I didn't understand that. As I think Santo was saying, I go places I don't think of that, or as Rick was saying, I see a picture of something on a screen, and even when we did our evaluations, I would say, well, that looked good, and they were like, no, very minute differences in how you see the picture, and that interpretation can mean drastic differences. So it was quite a journey for me to understand that whole process and how you tie the technical and the maybe the functional piece of this together to get what we're trying to accomplish. So that was quite a journey for me. And Richard Ray was a key person in my understanding, or my journey of how to understand that. So that was important. And as well as even the community members that we met with, as we met with Richard or with Rick and Sonja, and we did these evaluations. It was really nice to have them, because there are community members. They tell us like it is. They say, hey, I'm your neighbor. Here's what I see. Here's what's happening, and we can take that, and again, being more technical, we can put that into action. And as Rick was saying, due to COVID, we have done many things on CentraCare's network. Our wireless infrastructure, we regularly upgrade that stuff, but COVID did push us a little harder in that regard. And I will say, one of our wireless infrastructure and local area network, wired infrastructure is some of the best that I've come across. And we work with a lot of different hospitals, but we put a lot of effort into making that network function as good as we can. So it's a very good network. Kind of lost my place here, but again, we did consult with the consultant. We did an evaluation at the St. Cloud Hospital. We learned quite a few things about our network, as far as maybe coverage and stuff. And again, as I said, we upgraded, we made that system better. But the one thing that I started to see is we saw a lot of problems on Marty's end that I didn't at first understand. And what I came to realize is when you connect to a vendor or someone with VRI services, you get one interpreter one time, you may get another interpreter, and due to COVID, some of these interpreters are at home, and one may not have a connection like the next one does, or the right lighting, or the right headset, or stuff like that. So those things were brought to our attention, and our interpretive services director, Laura Cranston, she worked diligently with Marty on correcting those things and making sure there was standards as far as all of these things. And as they mentioned, frame rates per second to make sure that there's no blur and stuff like that. So, we really worked hard to improve our network, and then we kind of, I won't say pushed Marty, but really worked with Marty to get them to improve their network as well and help them understand what we started to understand. So that was important. And as they said, I think Della said it, on our second visit where we went out to the health plaza, things started to get better. We could visibly see that we were, kind of climbing this ladder together. We were all, learning from each other and making improvements and stuff like that. So I think we're all on the right track. But one of the things that came out of there, and I think Rick had mentioned as well, is this cart. In IT, we think of interpretive services. Get a cart, put a screen on it. Great, it works. Right? From a technology, let's make sure it can communicate. But it's more than that. If you're in the ETC, if you're, deaf or hard of hearing patient in the ER and you're on your back, the last thing you want to do is try to, roll over and try to see a screen that you're, having a hard time seeing while the physician's trying to talk to you and you're in pain, that type of stuff. So that was kind of the aha moment for me to say, wow, we need to find something that really works. And I think we did in this instance on this cart, the arm, and it sounds bad, but it was kind of hard to find a cart that had a longer arm because they maybe don't think that way, that you need to extend that over the bed. But I think we got one that works, and it seems to work fine. And again, we're going to move forward with these and try to make it as best as we can there. So did you have a question? I think you had a question.
So what if doctors are using their own laptops? How are they able to connect to this VRI system?
Yes, how many doctors are using?
How many doctors are using
VRI
this
system
The
for their
for telemedicine? How many are using this VRI system?
I'm a patient, and I go to the doctor sometimes, and I've noticed that in the rooms, all the doctors have laptops, and they're using the Wi-Fi system. And it seems to conflict with the Marty system that I'm trying to connect with in the same room. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah. Those would both be able to operate in the same without conflicting. I'm not sure what they're using on that, as far as that, what they're doing on their laptop versus the Marty system. Mm-hmm. And one thing we did do while we were, doing these evaluations is we took the Marty carts and we had one of our wireless experts with us, and we actually analyzed the traffic as we were doing the Marty calls with our laptops on the network and the Marty cart, trying to see where the problem lied. Where was this issue? And that's how we were able to kind of maybe shed some light on that more of this issue was on Marty's side of things, not necessarily on CentraCare's side of the equation here. So.
Okay.
And as far as what they were doing, I apologize, I won't be able to answer that, but maybe if we can connect after, I would love to get that information to our staff, and I can get an answer for you for sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see here. And again, I just want to say, this whole process, I've been in there for many years with Santo, and like I said, it's been 7 years, and I will say I've grown a lot, just as being more of a technical person. This has been, I guess, as beneficial for me as it is, for a lot of you as well, because I tend to focus on the black and white, the technical pieces of things, and this really kind of helped me look at things a little bit differently. And I, in turn, can help CentraCare and have helped CentraCare think of it a little bit differently as well. Sometimes, we people in IT, we're more analytical, black and white type people, but there's more to it than that. And I think that's probably the best thing that has come out of it from my perspective, from this whole journey. So, so thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so we've talked a bunch about this evaluation process and about how it worked and what we'd learned. I'm going to talk for a few minutes about what came out of that. Since we were all together, CentraCare, deaf community, DLC, as we went through the evaluation process, we all had the same floor. We all knew what the problems were, what needed to be fixed. That was my goal in starting this process. If we could all be at the same place and agree on what are the problems, then we can talk about how to fix it. I passed out before we started talking what's called a joint statement. This summarizes what we agreed that the steps that CentraCare was going to take now and in the future to preserve the improvements that were made and to make sure the system continued to improve. So let me review those points. Number one, in the future, from now on, CentraCare will use a Wi-Fi system for VRI on its end that meets or exceeds the standards of the system that we evaluated and that we decided worked. So they have committed to continuing that in the future, not just at this hospital, but as you know, CentraCare has been expanding over the years. As it acquires new facilities, if it builds new facilities, they've committed that the Wi-Fi system that powers the VRI is going to have to be at least as good as what we saw in the hospital. And there are standards for that. I don't remember if they're in the paper or not. I won't run through those. But those are standards that Richard Ray identified and communicated to Scott. Secondly, and I think this is an important part, CentraCare will continue to implement its policy of using in-person sign language interpreters to communicate with patients and their companions who are deaf for all scheduled appointments. If you set up an appointment in advance, then there's enough time to make arrangements to get an interpreter, and CentraCare is committed they're going to continue to do that. They're not going to replace in-person interpreters with the VRI system. Instead, they will be using the VRI system in non-scheduled, like emergency room visits, while they're also taking steps to get an in-person interpreter. Another thing that CentraCare has agreed to do is that it's going to conduct tests once a quarter, every year, of it, the VRI system and the hardware, to confirm that the hardware and, the vendors that they're using are in compliance with the standards that Richard Ray told them. They will take steps to include in their contracts with Marty or other vendors that their system will meet those requirements. And if they don't, as when they do these tests, then CentraCare can terminate its contracts with those providers who do not comply after they are given a warning and an opportunity to fix the situation. And CentraCare will get a new vendor who can meet those standards. Now, we've talked a fair amount of time about these carts. CentraCare has agreed it will have an adequate number of these carts in the hospital and its other facilities where they might be used. They've also committed to doing periodic training with new staff and the regular, the training they do every year for their ongoing staff about the need for interpreters. Why? What are the potential problems with VRI, and why it's necessary. So we think that process, that system that through collaboration we've agreed on, will make it, will help ensure that the system will continue to improve. Okay, let's see. I think it's still me, or is it you? Oh, okay.
So talking to CentraCare, within each silo in the different areas that we're in Little Falls, in all of the different locations that CentraCare operates, is this how it will be? Does that include everything?
That's what you can expect. And if it's not, I'm going to talk in a few minutes about what you can do if you encounter problems. I'm going to turn this over.
This is Della. I have a question. I don't know, maybe you two would be able to answer it. I have noticed that this Marty system I have used it, but I'm not sure exactly at the end when you can give a rating. Is there a system, a sort of survey, a set of smiley faces all the way to a frowny face that I might be able to click to provide feedback on the quality of the interpretation? Because the interpreter or provider may not know that the interpretation quality was lacking or was great. I think the survey post-interaction would be beneficial for deaf patients and providers.
So a couple of things. First, just as Rick had shared, you can expect this level of commitment to the capacity as well as to the approach in terms of the scheduled appointments and having someone there available for your scheduled appointments at all of the CentraCare locations. I will say, though, that it is not uncommon for folks to assume that we run certain facilities that we don't. So, for example, we don't own or operate the hospital in Little Falls, for example. So we can only commit to what we can control. But if you're running into trouble in Little Falls, we have great connections there, and I would be happy to be your liaison to contacting them to address those issues and to give them the benefit of a lot of the work we've done to identify where their issues might be. So we're not trying to keep a secret of how good CentraCare is at this. We're happy to share it with other folks. The other thing I would mention is we are currently in an evaluation phase with a new VRI system. We know you don't love Marty. We hear you loud and clear on that point. And so we are looking at finding a new vendor that not only can meet the standards that were talked about in the technical analysis, but a lot of that customer service ability to have folks available and ready and the right lighting. As you heard from Scott, so often these communications run at the lowest speed of whoever is involved in it. And so we can have all the bandwidth in the world. And if our vendor has someone at home in an apartment sharing Wi-Fi with 40 other people, that's how fast the communications are going to run. And that's not okay. And so part of our commitment is making sure that we really have the influence and the control end to end with our vendors to ensure that our investments you will reap the benefits from, rather than we invest and our vendors do not and the problems persist. So that's our commitment to you. And if you run into this at other institutions, you can certainly work with your attorneys, but we're happy to be a partner in addressing those concerns with other non-CentraCare facilities. And also, I want to say just one other thing. I learned through this that there is a very individual approach. There's not a one approach to interpretive services for the deaf and hard of hearing community. Some folks said to us very clearly, I just want to talk to someone right now. I don't want to wait for an interpreter to come. And other folks said, no, I want someone in the room that I can interact with very closely. And that is my preference. And so one of the things that your attorneys were very adamant about the entire time was, no matter how good you get the VRI system, it can't fully replace the in-person approach. Meaning that if we were able to solve all of the concerns of the VRI system, we couldn't then replace all of interpretive services with only the VRI system. And so that's why CentraCare is making that commitment to say, for those scheduled visits and even for emergency visits whenever possible, we want you to get the services and the interpretive services that you prefer. We will always use VRI as a backup when either there's an emergency or someone else isn't available, or the wait time is too long and we're dealing with something that needs to get dealt with and communicated right away. But where we can meet your preference, we will try and meet your preference. So that was a very important point that you all shared with your attorneys, and they were adamant throughout this process with CentraCare that if we spent all the money in the world to solve all of the technological issues, that it didn't mean that the people in the room would disappear. So I wanted to make sure that was clear as well. Are there other questions or comments? Go ahead.
A little bit more, Sonja, that's a little bit more. So let me end my part by saying a couple things. Here's a question. Why did we ask you all to come here? I'll tell you why. We want you to know what to expect when you come to the hospital in terms of communication. We want you all to have the same base knowledge that the evaluation team had, that CentraCare has, so that you know what to expect. And just by showing up here, you all are leaders in your community. You can tell other people what you heard tonight so that they know what to expect. So that's point number one. Point number two, I'm going to talk about what to do if your expectations aren't met? What if there are problems when VRI is being used? What if Marty doesn't come through? First of all, self-advocacy is really important. You, and I'm going to say this in terms of you, but I mean everyone in the deaf community, needs to tell the CentraCare nurses, medical staff who are in the room with you when the VRI system is not working. It's not good enough to just say, I don't like VRI, I don't want to use it. It's very important that you say, for example, if there's blurring, if there's bad pixels, if it's breaking up, tell them you cannot understand the interpreter because the image is bad. Say that. Otherwise, nobody's going to know. And if you want to fight about it later, what you're going to hear is, well, why didn't she say something? So say something. Say something when it's happening. That also provides the opportunity to fix the problem. And I'll tell you how. For example, one of the things that we experienced when we did the evaluation was delays in Marty answering the call for an interpreter. If that happens, all you have to do is hang up and call them again. And you tell the medical staff, end this call and call again. Usually, we were able to then get an interpreter much more quickly. If the Marty interpreter is not interpreting, it's not signing clearly, say that. You can ask for a different interpreter. Okay. First step was self-advocacy. The second step is you can complain to CentraCare by filing a grievance or a complaint through their system. Do that so that they know. I said part of the agreement that we had is they're going to be evaluating Marty. They need to hear from you. If Marty is not working, you got to tell them so that they know that now they need to find another provider if Marty doesn't fix things. Okay, Sonja, do you want to, what we're going to do here, Sonja will wrap this part up, and then we're going to open the door for the media if they chose to show up. We'll tell them about this agreement, answer their questions, and then we'll be able to spend more time with you if you have questions that you want to follow up on. So, thanks.
I did want to tell everyone, we do have brochures about the Minnesota Disability Law Center right over there by the pizza. So if you have any of your own questions or concerns or problems related to your failure to get accommodation, contact us, all right? We really do want to hear from people and work with you to address this. We are going to take questions. We were going to let the press in first if there are any here that would like to ask us questions. And if you would rather ask us a question without the press being present, Rick and I are going to go into another room just right around the corner here or something like that. Yeah, right across? Okay. And so if we can take the questions in private then. It's not like I can directly address a certain case that somebody has. We'll need you to go through the Disability Law Center to do that. But if you still have concerns, we can have some initial discussion with you about that. Okay? So we did want to open it up for discussion and for questions. Does anybody want to address anything now, or should we open the door first to see if we do have some press that we're interested? Okay. Anyone have any questions or concerns or issues that we should address?
This is Sherry. Hi, my name is Sherry, and thank you, MDLC, CentraCare, and the deaf community here. I appreciate this meeting, and I wanted to clarify, so the MARTI system, this cart is at a level, does it rise? Does it get taller and everything?
Yeah. We'd have Scott demonstrate how it works.
Yes. And so it can go up and down, and it has multiple.
Can it go all, I want it to go all the way down. So if I'm at a seated level, I don't have to look up at the screen, but that I can look square at the screen.
And you should be able to turn the screen down.
Yes, and
That doesn't happen in the other CentraCare clinic. It doesn't come all the way down to seating height.
And we are in the process of replacing those carts with these types of carts. So that will be a journey that we have to continue on and stuff. And from a technical standpoint, it was hard finding a cart that you could bring up, to this height and extend this far without tipping over and putting equipment on it. So it was a challenge to find something like this. It took some time to find a cart that would do this. And again, the main thing is when a person's in a bed laying in ETC in a prone position, to get that at the right height and to get it where it was comfortable for them to be.
Any other questions?
Sorry, which person are you calling on?
Yeah, do you want to finish you have another question? Then?
Yes, I do have another question. When it connects to the interpreting services and you're on hold, can the interpreter stay on the screen or do they put up a privacy screen? What is the policy there here at CentraCare or with MARTI?
Ask for some clarification. So do you mean physically in the room or on the screen itself?
No, on the screen itself. Does the screen have a privacy screen? If we leave, sometimes what happens is I panic. I see that the interpreter goes away, and I'm like, oh, we disconnected. And then all of a sudden, the interpreter comes on the screen and says, oh, no, I'm here. I can see you. But they can see us. We can't see them.
Oh, I believe.
I've not heard of that issue.
I believe that.
Ask others.
No, I believe that there should be a picture-in-picture. It shouldn't be that you can see them, or they can see you, and you can't see them. That shouldn't be the way it works. So if that's happening, that's somebody on the other end doing something that we don't want them to do. And so please, that would be something like Rick said earlier, complain to us about that. And so one of the things that I'll share with you in terms of CentraCare's grievance policy is we have a very broad kind of no wrong door grievance policy. And what I mean by that is you can go to the charge nurse, to your doctor, you can call the hospital, you can call and get routed to legal. You really can come at the organization from any angle and say, I'd like to file a grievance. And you will find your way into a formal policy and process where we investigate exactly what you're talking about. And we've done that in these cases, where folks have said, like this gentleman was sharing earlier, where is there a problem with what they're using in the room with what I'm using in the room? And we go all the way back to what was the date of the visit, who was in the room at the time, what laptop were they using, and we try and investigate what were the issues. Because sometimes we find out there are things that we learn that we need to improve. And other times, it's a coincidence that those things are going wrong, but we can still then identify that it's actually on the MARTI system, and then we can hold them accountable. So again, to Rick's point earlier, we really want you to come forward and tell us specifically what is going wrong, because I've not heard before, just like you shared, that there's a time where they can see you, but you can't see them. That shouldn't be happening.
And can I add to that? It's not doing exactly what you're saying.
It's happened to me as well.
I like that point that both Rick and Sonja made is help us help you, right? I mean, that's what it is. It's going to be a collaborative effort. So if that video of the interpreter is not there, they could have blanked their video for some reason. They could have a issue on their connectivity, something. And when they come back, ask them, hey, why did I not see your video? And if they give you an answer, relay that information on to CentraCare, and that will help us understand, because they can track what interpreter you had, what the session was, and then we can go back and look at our systems and see, hey, was it something on our network? Was it something with that specific interpreter? It really helps narrow that down. So it may not seem like much at the time, but if you can get those little details, that really helps greatly in trying to diagnose any potential issues or any issues that are going on. So. Here's a question.
Yes, please.
It's a personal comment. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait. I have to get over here. I missed that you were over here. Okay. This is Diane, and I've been listening to the presentation. I didn't see anything mentioned about CentraCare actually looking for a live interpreter or in-person interpreter. And I remember so many times in the past with VRI, they would say we can't find an interpreter. And so then if they couldn't find a live interpreter, we would write back and forth before VRI. But now, I used to work with Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services. I'm retired since, but MRID, Minnesota Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf, sent out a survey a few years ago, and they were predicting that in 5 years' time, half the interpreting population will be retiring and leaving the field. And that was maybe 2 years left on that 5 years. So what is the impact of finding an in-person interpreter, and how do we address that and continue? With VRI, we might be stuck with it. So I want people to know, because there is a crisis. There are not enough interpreters, and there's going to be less over time. So I think people need to know, and I didn't hear anything mentioned in your presentations about that.
I can perhaps just talk about the fact that...
Do you want to come up on?
Sure.
Sorry.
Certainly the lack of demographic, or I should say, the demographic changes you're talking about in the workforce exist across all of healthcare. And of course, where you already start with a service like interpretive services and ASL, more and more that is going to be more acutely felt. That was something that your attorneys were very, very adamant that we could not actually use the VRI system to replace the in-person interpreter. I don't think that I can promise you today that CentraCare is going to start its own interpretive services company, but what we have committed to is that we will find in-person interpretive services and continue to have that be our go-to and not have VRI replace the in-person interpretation services. What you say about the greater and greater difficulty of locating those services is true, I'm sure. And that will be a continued struggle, and probably something that we will have to do continued joint advocacy on. And so if that's something that you and your community want to work with CentraCare on, of advocacy with whether it be the county, the city, more than likely the state legislature, around getting the resources and the focus in those areas to get those services needed, that's really a problem bigger than just CentraCare, but it's not something that we're going to say, well, it's not our problem. So we would join you in that advocacy to try and get those services increased over time. You see that we're opening a medical school to address the exact same problems that you talked about with regard to interpretive services for rural physicians. There are a very, very small number of rural physicians that serve greater Minnesota. And in the next 5 years, a huge number of them will be retiring. So that's an area where we have partnered with the University of Minnesota to bring a 4-year MD degree out to greater Minnesota and to rotate, even at non-CentraCare sites. It's because we know that if folks train in rural Minnesota, they're more likely to stay in rural Minnesota. Now, I know here in St. Cloud, we don't consider ourselves rural. I get that. But in terms of the rotations they do to the critical access hospitals and the patients we see at the St. Cloud Hospital, a little over 50% of the time, they are from a rural zip code. And so we serve a very broad geography here. So as we partner with the University of Minnesota on getting that demographic challenge addressed, we would look to you to partner with you at the state legislature or other institutions, Gallaudet, whatever you would bring forward of, could we do something together that would actually increase the number of interpretive services in person in our geography, particularly for greater Minnesotans. I think it is, as you know, more difficult to get interpretive services in the room out of greater Minnesota than it is in the metro. And oftentimes when we are doing contracts, folks oftentimes are driving from the metro to come to the St. Cloud Hospital. So anything that we can do together to increase the focus on exactly what you're talking about was something that we'd be interested to do. Other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you hire interpreters at CentraCare? I mean, contract or staff? That was one of it. Thought I had is, do you have availability to be able to staff
we
CentraCare
contract
interpreters?
Yes, and we contract for multiple languages, not just ASL, but Somali, for Spanish, for Hmong. We have many, many demographics that we have to serve. And so typically the companies that work in this space work in kind of clusters of services that they do. And so that's how we try and meet the needs of our patients, is by working with vendors who really specialize in training and retaining those folks. Internally, the turnover, it would be very, very challenging to manage. Whereas with a vendor, we can hold them in a contract that you will provide the adequate number of folks to meet our needs. And if we're not getting the volume or the amount of services that we need, we can contract with another vendor to make sure that we're living up to that commitment.
Let me add one piece, because this touches on an area where when I first started doing work with the deaf community, questions like yours were very common. In the Twin Cities area, people were running into the problem of come to the emergency room. They didn't have an interpreter. They didn't have any way of getting them quickly. And so there wasn't effective communication. Some hospitals had staff interpreters in-house. They found that did not work. People would come to the emergency room after regular hours. They didn't have, there weren't enough interpreters available so that they could have 24/7 coverage. Contract agencies do that. And that's why in the Twin Cities, they've moved much more to working with contract services. Some hospitals do have a few in-house interpreters, but they're not sufficient to handle all the needs at all the times when people need them.
I just want to say thanks again to everyone for coming tonight. We're available for questions. I know that we're at the point where we promised some folks that we'd get you a room to have a private meeting with your attorneys that CentraCare wouldn't be part of. So I want to make sure I'm respectful of your time, and thank you to the CentraCare folks who helped this happen, and certainly to our interpreters here in the room. Thank you, and thank you very, very much for doing the interpreting here in the room. Really, really appreciate our ability to communicate with this community is entirely dependent upon the two of you, so thank you for that. If you have any questions, I'll be right over there, and we can continue to follow up. Please don't let this be the last time that we see each other. Come in, have meetings, we can talk, we can have more community meetings. As I said, tonight really wasn't about taking a victory lap. We're certainly grateful for the great partnership and work that we did with the Disability Law Center, but we absolutely believe that this is ongoing work and ongoing dialogue. So thank you to Rick and Sonja especially.
Let me add 2 things before we take questions, more questions if you want. Number 1, remember there's a lot of pizza over there. Please take it. CentraCare doesn't want to go back.
Rick, you can take it. You're retired. Go ahead and help yourself.
You probably saw me. I've been trying to feed my face while in between speaking. The other thing I want to say is related points. I'm very grateful that CentraCare agreed to collaborate. My experience has been that is a rare thing in the work that I've done. It would make life so much easier if other hospitals were willing to collaborate more. Related to that, and this goes back to why are you all here? Let me make a point. There's nothing, I don't mean to undercut anything that CentraCare has done or Scott's done. There's nothing that they have done that other hospitals in this state and around the country can't do. There's nothing magic about the technical changes. They were common sense. If other hospitals want to think about what's really needed. So what you all can do, I know how the deaf community works. You guys are connected all over the state. You can tell people what you've learned you can expect from CentraCare. Tell them you should be able to expect this from your hospital. It's not hard. It's not, with all due respect, it's not rocket science.
Adela said, absolutely.
It can be done. And you know what? There's a good resource for them. All they have to do is call CentraCare and ask, how did you do it? Scott.
And can I add on to that, Rick? Because I feel it's very important. Is I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. And you hit the nail right on the head. That's a key thing. Is again, I'll say it again. I'm a technical person, right? I didn't look at this. So my journey through this whole 7 years was eye-opening for me. And we're able to help CentraCare, being in the IS staff, help them with some of this stuff. So I think, this collaboration we're having here today, and we've had for the last 7 years, I think it's important that we continue that. So as there's issues, as we said earlier, help us understand what those issues are. We want to help. We want to make them better. But if we don't know, it's like when you bring your car in, if you say, here's my car, it's broken, and see you later, fix it. We don't know exactly or what was happening when I was doing that. It's hard to fix it. We want to have that collaboration with you. We want to work with you and really find out. And it was an understanding for me. And my wife's a nurse at the St. Cloud Hospital, and I obviously talked to her about this, and she had a whole different mindset than, as a nurse. And so I, of course, tried to help her understand and, tell your nurse friends this. And now that we're having this education that we've committed to and stuff like that, it's opened our eyes to that. And so I think we're all on the right track, but I think the key point, like Rick was saying, is it's this collaboration. That's the really key component of this that needs to continue on. So thank you all for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming.
All right.
Yeah.